SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Last week, as Jeremy Hunt unveiled the government's budget outside number 11 Downing Street, it felt like a pivotal moment for this Conservative government, with Rishi Sunak preparing for an election slugfest in 2024. However, the gambling sector appeared far from happy with the hand it was dealt, as the BGC offered a feisty response to government proposals and the potential impact they could have on the gambling sector, and also the sporting sector that works so closely with the gambling sector. For today's edition of the iGaming Daily, I'm joined by Ted Menmuir of SBC News and Danny Lee of Slot Beats and Casino Beats, as we provide a bit of an outlook on the budget and also how the year ahead looks for the gambling sector. Ted, thanks for joining us today. It's really good to have your insight on this discussion. How are you doing? How are you coping with the end of year news cycle?
Very well, Joe. I'm happy to be discussing everyone's favourite end-of-year subject, which is taxes.
It's a big one. It's an interesting time as well. So, yeah, really good to have you on board for today. And Danny, how are you yourself? How are you doing? It's a busy time of year for slot releases and for the slots industry.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of a nice break to sort of get away from covering a lot of Christmas theme releases that are coming out at the moment. But yeah, it's a slightly less jolly topic to be talking about, I guess.
Yeah, it's a nice break to talk some taxes. I don't know that I've ever heard that before, but we'll go with it. We'll go with it. And I guess to kick us off, Ted, can you tell us a bit more about the BGC's backlash over the government budget and sort of what caused their response, what irked them so much?
Okay, so let's return our minds back to the last Wednesday. It was the autumn statement by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, and it wasn't brought up in Parliament, but in the notes of what the Treasury is planning to do for 2024 was a referral that he will consult to bring remote betting duties into a single tax framework, replacing the industry's current three-tier structure. That basically means that remote betting duties on sports betting and pool betting might be revised from its standard 15% tax on operators' gross profit to go in line with remote gaming duties that are applied to online casino and online slots that are currently levied at 21%. So it's a significant 6% increase on the industry. And the BGC has kind of labeled this as a Trojan tax because it hasn't gone through the proper processes of being consulted on by DCMS, and has put forward kind of its statement on what a tax increase, how a tax increase would impact not only the gaming, but all stakeholders involved within the industry.
Yeah, I think something they really underlined was, the relationship the sector has with sports in terms of sponsorship, media rights, and to spike this tax, this economic time would impact that dramatically. And something else I wanted to ask you, Ted, it's sort of only loosely related, but this felt like, to many anyways, an election budget. Is that the feeling you got from it as well, or no? When should we be expecting an election, I guess, is the question I'm asking you.
Okay, before the election, I mean, yeah, you're right. You've got the Conservative government preparing its camp. I wouldn't say it's so much of an election budget, more kind of a grassroots budget and a call out to its base to get out and get out to the polls come the next 9 months. So there were kind of some treats there, but it's very hard, I think, for this government to control kind of the budget and then kind of put incentives in there. So I think in previous years, it would have been much more of a call of like, yes, we are going to call an election in 9 months. I'm still not sure whether the government are going to yes, they're going to have to do it somewhere in 2024, but I think it's going to be later in the year.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. It's very cold at the moment, so I don't know if people are going to get out there this time next year when it's Baltic out there. But yeah, and Danny, the other thing that was mentioned by the BGC was inflation. I think you can talk a little more on that, right?
Yeah, so the freezing of the gaming duty bans, the BGC CEO, Michael Duggar, referred to it as a stealth tax, as you said, which is sort of has the potential to slow the recovery of the industry. And I think he said that it would weaken future growth as well. And I think it's also sort of adding to a lot of uncertainty that the industry is going through at the moment, especially with like the white paper and the consultations that have come from that. It's just adding even more financial pressure on operators that they're already out of pocket due to issues like affordability checks and the new statutory levy being placed on them, which is still sort of uncertain as well, as the consultations have still sort of been finalised. And yeah, I think they have right to be sort of disappointed that that sort of stealth tax hasn't been sort of removed, and will sort of, again, add even more uncertainty into what's been quite a troubling year already.
Yeah, I guess it's worth noting as well that for land-based casinos, we are just off one of the, obviously for many sort of outlets like that, but for land-based casinos as well, we're off the back of one of the toughest economic periods with the pandemic and with being forced to shut. So it's only going to sort of compound the challenge there. And I guess that sort of brings me to my next question, Ted, is the theme largely, despite the tough economic climate across the board, generally speaking, now within the budget, not just for the iGaming sector, was tax cuts. It wasn't for the iGaming sector, but generally across the budget, there were a few tax cuts. It was quite a relatively generous budget in terms of that. However, the iGaming sector still felt the wrath of what is being described as a stealth tax and was viewed rather unfavorably by the budget. Does this indicate that the sector is still something of an easy target for government when it comes to spending and trying to find funds at a challenging time?
When you're assessing any budget, there's going to be winners and losers. Now, the headline, and going back to, is this an election budget, is Jeremy Hunt, as Chancellor, got a good kind of tagline to his budget, which is, we're taking 2p off the national insurance. And that's the benefit of workers. And even said this was the workers' budget. This is for the people that are in the mid-tier tax band. It's hard to say because, look, this referral is going towards a consultation. It will be assessed. The UK gambling overall contributes, 4.2 to 4.4 billion per year in taxes, direct taxes to the Treasury. Casino themselves is about 350 of that income. So, yes, this is a government dealing with significant deficit, especially that has been engrossed. Actually, a lot of it, you can say, a lot of the issues have come from kind of that mismanagement period by Liz Truss. So there is a big deficit there. But it has to put itself across as it's dealing with the big issues. Now, one of the things that they were really highlighting is that they're dealing with the inflation, and they're dealing with that direct inflation that is seen by the consumer on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to, if I was the Betting and Gaming Council, look, it's good that they're dealing with this on the front foot, but they don't really want to come across as like the victim of they are being targeted as a sector. I think that's the wrong approach. I think that you have to be able to go and sit down with the Treasury and say, look, if you're going to increase taxes, at what point and what is acceptable for businesses that contribute to direct employment, especially on the retail. And as you see, kind of casinos towards the local communities, right, as direct employers. I think that's a good message that they are trying to come out with. Again, it's under consultation, everything to play for. This is more of a test of the BGC representing the industry as a trade body than the government and how it views or how it wishes to regulate on gambling.
That's really, really interesting, to be honest. So I guess part of that is that they don't represent it in the wrong way and don't almost lean into the bad guy character by being the victim of a budget that is for the workers, as you say.
Yes, I mean, look, every kind of retail sector in the UK is suffering at the moment post-COVID. And I think that as an industry trade body, you've got to kind of be reflective of that and understanding of that. And also, you got to be able to see what the government is trying to measure. What are kind of the headline concerns of the government and how to try to deal with that.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. A really vital time for the BGC, I guess. And I sort of back your stance that they've, being on the front foot is a good thing. Danny, in terms of they've mentioned obviously the impact it will have on casinos and on the gaming sector, but also on the sectors that are supported by these industries. What knock-on effect do you think this could have for the sporting industry?
Yeah, it certainly looks like a knock-on effect is sort of a big part of the BGC's response, certainly when it comes to horse racing. So again, Michael Duggar referred to the tax as a hammer blow to horse racing due to the amount it is supported by the UK's gambling industry. And sort of as the government sort of continues to put strains on the gambling industry, then it will only be putting strains on that sport itself, which is such an important part of British culture, really. I think they referred to it as the second biggest sport in the UK behind football. It certainly will be in terms of wagering as well for the industry. And it's a very patriotic sport as well, with such rich history in the country. So you can understand, again, the disappointment after everything the industry has done to sort of keep it afloat. And then when more pressures come along like this, it only hinders so many different parts of the industry as well, not just horse racing as well. There's so many other compartments that could be affected. And I just think maybe to respond to Ted's point a bit, maybe their response is so sort of, how should I put this, sort of reactive due to sort of the way the industry has sort of been treated by the government in the past couple of years. They might be at their wits' end, so to speak, with sort of the changes they've had to go through, the proposals they've gone through. I mean, you look at the levy that's been introduced and the BGC's response to that. So they encouraged that levy to be tiered, so that parts of the industry that aren't doing as successful aren't sort of having to pay as much in as companies that are. And when you look at that tiered system sort of being taken away from taxes, that's probably a bit of a kick in the teeth in that respect.
Yeah, so from your perspective, it sort of makes sense that the levy system there is replicated within the tax system as well. Yeah, that's a really good point, and it will be interesting to see if sort of they take lessons. I guess it leans into the importance of a collaboration, and I think that was another one of the BGC's criticisms, was that the DCMS wasn't consulted here on these stealth tax rises and on this budget so much when it comes to the gambling sector. Do you think that's a worrying sign that the communications between the DCMS and the head office aren't great here? Or what do you make of that?
Again, this is a point where the BGC have to be quite tactile, because DCMS will be consulted because this is going to consultation, right? So nothing has been decided, but it's just, and I also think, look, the Treasury probably looks at gambling and says, okay, how do we kind of simplify that tax system to the benefit of us generating taxes from an industry? And again, this is a government that wants to reduce taxes, but in order to reduce taxes at a worker level, it has to find somewhere else to generate it from. It's in terms of its impact on the wider one of the stakeholders. Look, I think that the government knows that UK gambling is going to go through a period of seismic transformation when the gambling review comes in. And it might just go full hog and just say, okay, well, if they can deal with that, they can then deal with their kind of tax structure being reformed and simplified into one. And I think that is kind of where the BGC is talking about a kind of Trojan horse that, look, we'll accept the gambling review and its amendments, but pushing it onto taxes is just taking it too far.
Yeah, that's quite damning. And I guess it leads to a nice conclusion, because all of this very much does hinge on the White Paper review and the Gambling Act review. That very much dictates where we go as an industry in the UK in the coming year. So just obviously you are the editor of SBC News, you're very much across all things Gambling Act review. Are there any updates? Where do we stand as we head into 2024? We are absent of new regulation, so to speak, heading into the new year, which I'm sure will be a disappointment to many and would have been something that will be disappointing to hear from the start of the year, if you get what I'm saying. But yeah, where do we stand as we head into 2024 on the Gambling Act review?
Very much where we were when we stood in 2023. Okay, no, look, we made progress, as in we know the text of the gambling review, its focus points. And now I think the stakeholders are looking at kind of the technical realities of, like, how do we implement change? Do we have the resources to do that? What is achievable? So, as was stated 2 weeks ago, they've now launched kind of the 7 technical consultations of how does the UKGC achieve the changes that are deemed fit in the gambling review, in terms of RET contribution, customer protections, KYC compliance, and finally kind of incentives and actual engagements with the customers, and also consumer redress. And look, in its first kind of responses, it got over 20,000 responses were submitted in the first stage of the gambling review, and I think that's even going to double by this consultation phase. And I think we'll have a clearer picture by February and March of the actual mold of the gambling review that we put to Parliament for vote. It's now a case of, if you're an operator, it's really planning how the sector and the sector's landscape and the terms of play are going to change in the next 12 to 24 months, and also what is the cost of the play to be in the UK, and how much money in profits can you actually generate out of being in this market. And look, if it does come to that, and if the consultation points towards an increase in taxes, right, or a simplified structure, I mean, that's going to be another kind of bone of contention of, like, how much costs will it take to become effective in the UK for any operator, whether you're PLC, mid-tiered, or a small enterprise?
Yeah, that's crucial. It's got the market has to remain alluring and attractive. So, yeah, that's vital. And I asked you to predict the future once. I guess we'll go again with that. We'll dip back into the crystal ball for both of you here. As we approach consultations on the budget, we've been discussing, can the BGC sway this with their sort of the things they're lobbying for? And does it even matter if they don't? But as much as they're seen to be fighting for the industry, that's the main thing, even if they don't actually sway the regulations that are coming into place, or the tax, the legislations that are coming in.
Yeah, so the government clearly has a lot of priorities on its priority list right now, and you just hope that obviously the gambling review and the response from the BGC isn't overlooked due to the many different things that are dealing with. And I think one thing it'll certainly hope for is a bit more of that collaboration that it was missing with this budget. So obviously the BGC has a much closer relationship to the DCMS than it does the government, and to see it sort of being kept out of the loop in this budget probably feels a bit damning in some ways. And I'm sure in its responses, it will be getting in contact with the right people to sort of make the industry's voice heard. And I think we are starting to see that already with these responses and the sort of attitude it's taken to the budget anyway.
In my opinion, look, you've got to rewind the clocks. When the BG took over this kind of agenda and what's happened to the UK now, we've had 3 prime ministers coming into the general election year, so that may be 4 by the time they took over the gambling bill's remit, and it's crazy to make any prediction in the UK with current UK government dynamics. Now, I think when the BGC came in, especially Duga being an ex-New Labour Prime Minister, I thought that he knew kind of that the script that this government wanted to hear, jobs creation, economic contribution, employment figures, right? And to be honest, they've all been flushed down the toilet over the last 4 years. So how do you approach them? Because they keep on changing their agenda every 3 months, right? On every subject matter, on the economy, on how they tackle the inflation, on the migrant crisis, right? And all they seem to have is they go back and refer to this kind of like cultural context, right? Which I think any industry kind of trade body just wants to avoid with a barge pole. So again, I really feel for the BGC on this, right? Because the approach, I think for any trade body dealing with the government, and yes, there is lobbying, I think, and yes, there is a point of like, you want to have some influence, or you want to have your say with them. But the thing is, this government keeps on changing its script every 3 months on its approach of how it's going to kind of convince the electorate to re-vote for them, what it wants to hear, and how it wants to kind of reshape Britain's kind of big vision, right, in Britain's economy. And it's where does kind of gambling fit in this? And I just don't think the BGC have been told, or kind of settled in the way to kind of engage with this government.
Yes, a good point. It's impossible to sing from the same hymn sheet as the government when the hymn sheet is thrown out the window and changed every single week. It's a real tough task, and one that I don't envy. But I'm sure we'll be back to discuss it further, and in the new year we'll be discussing the white paper. Ted's promised us March, April time that we'll have some news. So yeah, we'll check back in then and find out more. And thanks ever so much for joining us, and thanks for your time, and look forward to seeing you next time.
SBC Media.